Hey guys, it's Tombox, and today I am angry. I discovered that a lot of you guys out there don't actually watch my ruling videos, and therefore got penalized with these things I have talked about, and that is very disappointed. I am disappointed in a lot of you guys, but for those of you guys who actually watch ruling videos, well, today's video is actually going to be about the PE minors that you guys can easily avoid for your future events, and we'll jump right into this one. So make sure you guys smash that like button, hit that subscribe, ding the notification bell, or else I will give you a game loss through the internet, because that is a procedural error major that you guys haven't subscribed to the channel already. Okay, so this video is going to be about the most frequent misplays that happened over the past weekend. Now, the past weekend I was at YCS Niagara Falls as a judge. I was mainly assigned to the VIP judge and also top table judges for the most of the events of day 1 and day 2. And I caught a lot of things too, so yes, I did issue penalties to people, but I'm not going to talk about the penalties I issued to people because that's not what we're supposed to talk about at all. But rather, I'm going to be looking into the procedural errors, the plays themselves that have occurred that was very frequent, and why these things shouldn't happen. And I also got to meet a lot of the other judges that do argue in my comment section. Hello, Wes. The shout outs to you, and of course there's never bad blood between us because you and I, we can talk, and you provide links, you provide references, and it's all about providing that discussion. So, you know, even if you argue in the comment section, I'm not gonna be like, oh my god, I'm not gonna talk to you. No, it's nothing like that. So anyways, let's just jump into this one, and hopefully you guys don't get screwed over in your next coming events. Okay, number 1, we have Nibiru. Oh boy, this is round 2 of our discussion. So to give you guys a bit more depth about what happened with Nibiru, so the first thing is make sure you count your summons before you drop it. Whether or not you're bluffing or not, that is completely up to how the judges rule. So make sure you ask your head judges how they think about that. But in terms of this particular event, no one was DQ'd for counting or bluffing Nibiru in this case, because a lot of the cases it can be looked at as maintaining the game state. And speaking of maintaining game state, people have been actually penalized for illegally activating Nibiru. And the illegal activation is they only summoned out 4 times and you tried to drop the Nibiru, and when you tried, you revealed the Nibiru in your hand, which it's technically private information, but the illegal is activation, therefore you have to hide it again, and your opponent is not going to play into your Nibiru anymore. So that was a procedural error that did occur on multiple occasions, and I did catch multiple occasions of this as well. So just count it, okay guys? Whether or not your opponent actually has it, it's private knowledge, but if you're counting the summons, you are maintaining the game state, and you won't have that disadvantage of, oh, I was the guy that tried to summon Nibiru on the 4th summon. Like, you don't want to be that guy. And if you guys get another procedural error warning, because it's your second offense, it might get upgraded to a game loss. And simply because you didn't count monsters, that is a very disappointing way to get a game loss, alright? And speaking of which, can you bluff Nibiru? What is considered as unsporting? Well, it would be unsporting if your opponent is being very aggressive and annoying and obnoxious on the way that they are counting, like 1, 2, 3. Now, like, if they do it like that, then that's pretty obnoxious. But if they're just counting in their head, they're like, I don't know, they're just fidgeting with their fingers, and you're just assuming that they're counting your summons. But their opponent can also ask you, how many summons have you performed this turn? Because that is actually part of the game state. And simply by asking you that question, it's almost like they projected, like, you know, when your opponent asks you, oh, does that thing summon from the deck? Does that project that they have an Ashe? Oh, does that thing activate? Then does that project an ogre? Like, there's a lot of things that can pseudo project various things, but maybe they're just trying to clarify the effect. In a lot of the cases, if they're being polite, they're just doing it for clarification. And same with asking how many monsters you've summoned. They're asking for clarification, but in your mind, you know you're thinking about Nibiru, but we can't control what you think, guys. So that's the end of that Nibiru discussion there. But there's also another Nibiru PE procedural error that has occurred, and that one is people have been activating Nibiru in the battle phase. You cannot activate Nibiru in the battle phase. Just read the first line of the card. It says during the main phase, and that was huge. And to some Sky Striker players have gotten hit with the Nibiru. I believe I have to give a shout out to this one. Shoutouts to More Shed Reza by the request of the player. So what happened was, to make a Utopia double usually requires about 4 summons. You need to summon a level 4, another level 4, and then you go into Utopia double, and Utopia double summons one more time into the Utopia. That's 4 summons, but if your zones was blocked out by your own monsters, you'll need to link up, and that's your 5th summon. And that is where someone got Nibiru'd, and I feel very bad for you because that means it's supposed to be game for you, but the Nibiru got dropped, so that was rough. So make sure you guys read your cards. If you're about to die to some card effect, pick up the card and read it, just to make sure that everything up until that point was legal. And usually, if it's still reversible game state, it will get reversed right back to the point where it happened. I think both players may receive a procedural error at that point because it's up to both players to maintain the game state, and to some degree your opponent technically was the one that did illegally activate the card, so it might just be one person receiving a bit of a procedural error minor warning in that case, because they revealed Nibiru. Once again, illegal activations of Nibiru was a pretty big part of the weekend. Catching them is both everyone's job to make sure that the game stays maintained properly. Okay, so that's enough with Nibiru. Let's move on to the next one. All right, number 2, we have Ashe versus Servant of Endymion. So this one is a pretty popular one. Now, YCS Portland and YCS Niagara Falls both followed the same ruling, which was if your Servant of Endymion uses its effect in the pendulum scale and that effect gets negated by an Ashe, you will not be able to use its effect once again because it counts that it has made an attempt to summon the Servant of Endymion, and that is a summon that you can only perform once per turn, and therefore it counted it, and you cannot do it anymore. And that's what happened at YCS Portland. That's what is happening at YCS Niagara Falls. So I think this might be the ruling moving forward, but I can't say a guarantee here. So if it ever changes at your next YCS or your next big event, well then that is that. Just ask your head judge about this one. And as a follow up to that, there's also Orca Crescendo's the search effect and machine duplication with Cyber Dragon Core. So if your opponent activates a machine dupe targeting a Cyber Dragon Core, which is currently named as Cyber Dragon, and it gets ashed, your opponent will not be able to activate the effect of Orca Crescendo to search, because Cyber Dragon Core is technically a light monster, and since the activation was not negated, the attempt of the summon still occurred even though it was negated. Although no light monsters were summoned onto the field, the attempt was still counted towards that summon of a light monster, and therefore Orca Crescendo will not be able to search a dark machine monster out of the deck, because Orca Crescendo, very different from most of the other Orcus monster, which is for the rest of the turn you can only summon out dark monster. This one in particular made sure that for the entire duration of the turn for Orca Crescendo, you will not be able to summon any other type of monster aside from dark machines. So there was that huge limitation right there, and because this ruling and of the Ashe and Servant and the Orca Crescendo and the Cyber Dragon Core, they're very similar in nature, and therefore they were ruled in the same manner. Of course, you can always ask your head judge, you can always appeal. I know this ruling was particularly common for people to appeal for, because like, oh, there was no light monster actually summoned. But then again, it's because it was Ashe that stopped it, rather than the entire activation being negated. So if the entire activation was negated, then that should have been fine. But unfortunately, if you get Ashe by something, it still goes to proceed to resolution, and at resolution the effect is negated, but that means the attempt was already made. That's the logic behind that one, and we'll move on to the next one. And procedural error number 3, Shizuku. I was a bit surprised on this one because this one, there was a lot more people playing Sky Striker, of course, and Shizuku was one of the more frequently activated cards during the end phase. Now, the common thing is people are adding illegal targets. They have a copy in their graveyard and decide to add another copy into their hand. Sometimes it's because their graveyard's so full, they didn't fan out their graveyard properly, so then they're like, oh, I'll add another copy of Jamming Waves, even though Jamming Waves was already in the graveyard. In fact, most of the time, it's actually the Jamming Waves that's screwing them over. They're like, oh, I see the Engage, so therefore I can't add Engage, so I'll add the Jamming Wave instead, or they'll add the Shark Cannon, but there was already another Shark Cannon. So make sure you look at your graveyard very carefully so that your opponent isn't adding illegal targets, because there have been some games where basically every single copy of a Sky Striker card has already been put into the graveyard, so Shizuku shouldn't even be allowed to activate. So maintaining the game state is up to the Sky Striker player to know what is in their deck, so they don't receive a procedural error minor on this particular case. So yeah, there's the Shizuku one right there. And speaking of illegal search targets, Salamangrates, there's only one thing that has really caught my eye this particular weekend. It is anyone that summons out Lady Debug, make sure that they're not adding Salamangrate Foul, and making sure that they're not adding Falco, because those are level 4 monsters, and Lady Debug can only add level 3 or lower Cybers monsters. It's very common because a lot of people just think of it as Stratos because they abbreviate the effects in their head. Who wouldn't want a level 4 or lower ad from Lady Debug? But no, it's level 3 or lower only. So yeah, Falco, if you're using Falco correctly, yeah, Falco can constantly recycle your cards non-stop, and that's how you gain a ton of advantage as playing Salamangrates. But you can't search Falco with Lady Debug, and that was, I guess, one of the more common illegal searches that happened. This last little bit is about illegal summons that occurred over the past weekend. It was the most frequent thing that happened. A lot of the times it was actually Orcus players that forgot that they were under the Orcus condition, which is if you activated an Orcus effect, you're locked into only summoning out dark monsters. A lot of people forgot that, and they were going into various monsters that they can't go into, like Nightmare Monsters. You can't go into Nightmare Monsters. It's not a follow-up play of recovery to go into a Mermaid after your opponent burns out your cards and you already used a Nightmare Monster. That is not a possibility. So there's that. Other things such as using 2 of the same name monsters to go into Nightmare Monsters, that's not possible. 2 Rays does not make a Nightmare Phoenix. You need a different name. I believe Barricade Borg Blocker is also under the same stat. In terms of, I guess, Ningirzu, you need Link monsters to make them, and for a Boral Sword or any Boral Load monster, all your monsters need to be effect monsters. You can't use a Flamvel Guard in there to make yourself a Boral Sword because that's just not the correct recipe. And that's kind of the summary of most of the illegal summons that occurred over the past weekend. But make sure you guys catch it, because all it takes is just looking at the card, reading the card, and all situations should be solved. And it's a very easily repairable game state if it does occur, and you guys can reverse it yourselves if a judge is not available. But yeah, that is all I got for this video, guys. Did you guys learn something about what you should and should not catch? Yeah, well, that's all I got. I know this format's only gonna last for a little bit more, and hopefully you guys don't get penalized by these various small things that everyone should be paying attention to, but it still occurs, so that's why we're bringing it up. Very frequent. And well, if you guys enjoyed this video, smash that thumbs up button. Don't forget to hit the subscribe, ding the notification bell, and I won't send you guys to the Shadow Realm next time, alright? Until next time, I'll see you guys in the next one.